Welcome back, my little subscribers. Today, we're talking about the compact Sony cameras, the A7C line. Welcome back. So if you've been watching my channel, you know that I've been using the A7C to record all of my latest videos in this style. So it's not anything demanding. It's a very controlled environment. I can set up my light. I can set up my camera I want. So how has that worked out? And is the A7C still worth it for me? I'm sure you've all been watching the new craze over the A7C II and the A7CR. So today I want to talk about the original A7C and whether it's still worth it or not. So I'm going to go over the top 5 things that I like and the things I don't like about it. And then you can make your decision, and in the process, I'm basically making my decision if I'm going to get rid of it or not. The A7C is basically Sony's compact and entry-level full-frame camera. Now, with the new ones coming in, that's changed a little bit on whether they are those new entry-level or not because of the pricing, but we can't deny they are very compact. Even though it looks like they just shaved off the top, it is very reminiscent of the A6000 series. So the first thing I love about this camera in general is the size and usability. Just looking at it, it's very attractive and enticing to take this everywhere you go because of the size. I mean, I remember starting off with the A6000 series when the Sony cameras were starting to get really good. And this is basically the same size, but with the benefit of it having a better build and looking a little bit more professional. I'm more likely to bring this camera out and not have to worry about standing out or anything because it's so compact, or if I'm traveling, because of the size and usability, it's just easy to put in bag or carry on you, and it doesn't take that much space. Number 2, build and familiarity. So like I said, this reminds me of the A6000 series, and if you are a fan of those cameras, they're great APS-C cameras. You're basically getting that similar style body with the full frame sensor, which a lot of people in the past had been asking Sony to do. So they did it, and of course, there's some things that we'll talk about that not everyone likes, but the fact is, it's familiar, and it's an A6000 with a full frame body basic. Number 3, this is more applicable to all kind of Sony cameras basically, and that is the fact that we have so many lens options now. We're not limited to just the Sony made lenses, the native ones. We have so many third party from Sigma, Tamron. Oh my God, we have Viltrox, Mikey. Like, there's so many brands out there now that are making autofocus lens, manual focus lens. Chances are you'll be able to find a very nice and effective compact lens to fit on this and make it super portable. Whether it's the kit lens, like 20-60 from Sony, or like a prime lens from Samyang or Rokinon, a 45, a 35, a 24, what else I got? 75, 1.8. Those are all super compact, making this thing pretty impressive to just carry around and only have a lens that goes out this much, 2 to 3 inches. So the options are not endless, but they're plentiful options and for very good accessible pricing. Like a Rokinon or Samyang, for example, as low as 100 to 150 at the very bottom low of the range, up to like 300 to 400, and you can have a super compact, really nice sharp lens that is catching up with the autofocus and all these features, right? Number 4, the video modes. So Sony's one of those companies that when they release something new, they tend to put almost everything that they already have out in other cameras into their new ones. So this one's no exception. I mean, there are limitations because of the type of camera it is, being compact, but you still get your 4K 24, your 4K 30, your 1080 at 120 and 60 and 30 and so on. You're getting the essentials basically, not the specialized options like a 4K 120 or a 4K 60, but nonetheless, for a quick travel camera or something like what I'm doing, where you don't necessarily need 4K 60, this is amazing to have in a compact package. Plus, you're getting all those, all the picture profiles that you would expect to get from Sony, and they don't limit those. They put those in all their cameras. Whether it's good to use all those picture profiles or not is a different story that we'll talk about. And then lastly, number 5, the photo modes. You will basically get everything that you usually expect from a Sony camera, getting the high frame rates. This one shoots about, I think it's 10 shots in a second with mechanical. You're getting all your standard modes, all the shooting modes that you're used to using in Sony, like real-time autofocus and all the different focus positions that you can put in there. They're all in there. So it's nothing different in that sense that you're gonna be missing out from using other Sony cameras. So now let's talk about the things I don't like. And these are the things that have been bothering people from the beginning, because even though this is considered the entry level of the full frame, at least for the most recently released cameras, it isn't affordable when you take into consideration the other options. So let's talk about the things I don't like, and I know a lot of you don't like. Number 1, the menu system. Yes, it's something dumb to nitpick, but I really wish they would have put the newer menu system, because this came out at a time where the newer one already existed. And I get that they wanted to kind of recycle the older sensor and just like use their already existing technology. But if you already were releasing the new cameras with the new menus, it would have been neat to just have the new menu in this one and just make them all the same across the board versus leaving this one kind of behind in a different time. Number 2, when it comes to video, they didn't skimp out on including all the picture profiles, but I wish they would have made this 422 up front. Like I said, this is coming out in a time where all the other Sony cameras have the new menu and 422. It's kind of difficult to understand why they didn't just include the 422 in the first place. It felt kind of like they were putting this one out to kind of just tell everyone, hey, this is where we're going. More to come. But at the same time, it's like people buying in, and it's a lot of money to invest. So they should have included it. Number 3, the EVF. This one's a favorite. The EVF, for me, like I'm primarily a photographer, the EVF, I'm kind of torn on saying it sucks or not. It's usable, that's what I'll say. It's not good to use in broad sunlight. Whenever I have used it, I end up having to cover the sunlight coming in kind of like this and shooting. So that is a bother. I mean, you can add a different EVF cover here, a sunshade basically, but it would make it a little bit bulkier, and I think it would get in the way of the screen. But in terms of the resolution of the EVF, it is reminding me of the entry level A6000s, not really a full frame camera where we would expect a higher resolution and a little bit bigger EVF. I think other camera brands making things similar to this size have been able to put better EVF, so it's just a bummer that this has become one of those deterrents from getting into this kind of camera. Number 4, I wish there were, like if you're making a compact camera like this, I wish they played more with adding custom buttons. Like we're missing a wheel at the front. I know they've corrected that now, but we are missing a wheel at the front. And because it's a smaller body, I feel like they could have taken advantage of adding either some buttons or some dial, or kind of like the Fuji style at the front end where you control the autofocus modes. I know some of the compact cameras use that. I feel like they could have used a little bit of that space to make this just a little bit more custom to the user experience. Finally, number 5, and this one's just from my opinion, I wish they would have made a version of this with the 12 megapixels instead of making the ZVE1. The ZVE1, I understand, was more geared towards vlogging and creating. I feel like they could have made a mix between what they had in mind for this and the ZVE1. So I wish they would have had 2 options, so to say, from the beginning when they released this. For those who are more focused on the video, could have had the 12 megapixel with the mic on the top and the EVF, versus just having this one option, and whether you like it or not, it kind of like it was a love-hate relationship when this one came out. So those are my 5 likes and my 5 dislikes. So now we have the A7C II and the A7R. So with all the specs and stuff coming out on that camera, do I feel like I should get rid of this? Or if I was coming in and considering one of these compact ones, what would my choice be with these new options? In general, if you are not limited in your budget, I feel like the new ones definitely make more sense, and especially the A7C II, because it's essentially an A7 IV with this, you know, reduced compact style body. Both of the new A7C cameras have higher megapixel. They have the 422. They're adding all these things that I felt I was missing from their initial release. And like I said, it felt like they just put this one forward as a placeholder while they were figuring out how they were going to release these other ones at a higher tier. The new A7C II and A7CR, that's so many numbers and letters, have that neat wheel control at the top with the modes where you can easily jump from photo and video, separating those settings completely. I feel like that's something that I wish they would have done from the beginning, having the A7 IV already released. And I also wish my A7S III had that function, which it doesn't. But I think that makes that more of a hybrid camera to have that easy to jump back and forth feature. In consideration of this one versus the new ones, the price does matter a lot, to be honest. When you're looking at the A7C II, it's so close to the A7 IV in price that it's very difficult, unless you really, really want this style, it's gonna be a pretty tough decision to not just go with a larger body. And for the A7R, I mean, you are saving like about $1,000 between the A7R5. But again, is it because you really want this style? So it is a debate that you have to consider for yourself on whether you think it's a good investment or not. The benefit of these 2 new ones coming out is that this one in my hand, you can now buy used between $1,300 and $1,400 versus brand new. The other ones are starting at $2,200. So you can potentially get a good savings right now and get this camera. And even though it doesn't have all these new features like the 422 and they didn't improve the EVF, better grip, wheel, all that stuff. If you can live without those extra things that do make the cameras better, this is still a very good option because it's very versatile. It's the 24 megapixel A7 III sensor. You're still getting those 10 shots per second in the highest frame rate. You're still getting the essentials of video making here. If you can live with that, this is not a bad deal for $1,300 to $1,400. They might even drop more, to be honest, as these new ones roll out. This might end up hitting $1,000. And I feel like at $1,000, this is a very good option for anyone getting into photography and wanting full frame, or someone who wants a backup camera. And you know, when you're shooting in a professional setting and you need a backup or a second camera, and this could be a very good option if it ends up dropping to $1,000. And I think it's very close to getting there, maybe in a few months. So in conclusion, who is this camera for? It's for who I mentioned. I think it's for people who want a compact camera or just getting into full frame. For the used price, you can get this first version of the A7C for a lot better than a couple months ago, or buying it new, compared to these new versions that came out that are significantly more expensive. I think they're good secondary backup cameras for professional photographers. They're great cameras for travel. We have to remind ourselves that Sony, Canon, Nikon, all these cameras are constantly releasing new stuff. That doesn't mean that the old stuff that's a year or 2 or even 3 years old is not good anymore. You know what I mean? So you got to be smart with your money and invest where you think is the best spot. And again, back to that other point, the autofocus is still really great. You still have real-time autofocus on this. So even though you're getting those new AI autofocus, in the real world, it may or may not be noticeable. And this is still really good, even though it's just a year or 2 old. Finally, I think this type of camera is good for those who are looking for compact cameras. So we know APS-C cameras can be more compact, or those 1-inch compact cameras that already have the lenses integrated, this is a great option to have a similar size with a full frame sensor. And if you find one of those really compact lenses and there's a handful of them, you can end up with a super compact, very similar in size to one of those 1-inch sensor APS-C cameras with a full frame. So it's a great alternative for someone who's looking for just a pretend like you just have one lens and you don't switch it type of idea. This could be that camera. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm just thinking out loud, like, I don't know. I'm actually torn on whether I want to keep this camera as a backup and for travel and, you know, situations where I don't want to bring out an A7 IV or an A7 III. This camera's still just as capable. Yeah, it doesn't have everything, you know, but a lot of cameras don't. That doesn't mean you can't use them and get results. It's still the E-mount. You can adapt lenses. I've made previous videos, if you've watched them, where I've used manual lenses with autofocus on this camera. One example is, even though it's chunky and not attractive, this is one of my favorite vintage lenses. This is a Leica R from 1980, 50mm Summicron. And by putting this lens on the Tech Art autofocus adapter, I end up with an autofocusing Leica lens on this compact camera. And just holding these two right now, this lens is heavier than this camera. But once you put them on, it's more balanced, and I'd say it's not overly bulky. I could still take this everywhere and enjoy it. So it really comes down to how do you want to use the camera and if this is a good option for you. I mean, it doesn't have the 2 card slots, it doesn't have the better EVF, but at the end of the day, it's a full frame and you can still get great results. You don't have to worry about the mechanical shutter because even though it goes up to 1/4000, when it's bright, you can put it in electronic and it'll hit the 1/8000 of a second. And when it matters to use mechanical, like indoors and low light, you'll have that. So I wouldn't say that's a compromise. A lot of cameras are using the electronic shutter now. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is still a great camera. I have to think about whether I'm keeping it or not. I mean, it's holding it. It's not a camera I'm using a lot anymore, but it is a great backup or for travel, like I said. So let me let me know down below. Do you agree? Like, should I keep this? Would you just go for this one versus the new ones, considering the price difference? And could you live without those new upgrades? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching.